Well, the haters gonna hate, 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 and the fakers gonna fake, 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 baby. I'm just gonna making luck, a Dominion podcast. Welcome to Making Luck, a labor podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So, just so we get this out of the way, just in case something happens, I am not 100% positive that my wife is not in labor upstairs right now.
I feel like I'm 100% positive that she's not currently in labor.
Really?
Because you would know about it.
Really?
Yeah?
Are you sure?
No, I mean, I've never had a baby.
She's been having Braxton Hicks for the past 2 days pretty consistently.
Oh, well, what is labor?
Labor is when you start having contractions.
Oh, so she might actually be in, like, contractions that lead to a child.
Yeah. Like, this could be early labor. No joke.
Oh, man.
Not kidding. Like, we're in week 39. It's go time. I'm not going to give you any more details, but, like, any minute now,
she might.
Like, in the middle of this podcast, she might come down and be like, hey, we need to call some people. And at that point, well, I don't know.
Well, we're going to finish the episode, obviously, but we might have to rush our analysis of the kingdom.
In any case, what I'm trying to say is chances are pretty high that if you're hearing this and it's like September 2018, that the next time you directly hear from us is going to be after a couple of mini-sodes.
Right. Because Adam's going to have a child to raise real quick.
Yeah.
And then we can get back to the podcast after that.
Yeah.
But because the baby is so close, that means that if you win this week's raffle, you will get a very special prize. You'll get to cut the umbilical cord of Adam's baby. So, enter to win and get a once-in-a-lifetime privilege.
Oh, God. Let the record show that if I don't allow you into that room, you're not getting in there.
Which is why you have to win the raffle. You can't just do
and
it.
And I'm doing that. Okay? If you try and do anything otherwise, you'll probably be arrested. Just so we're clear on this. Like, they have police officers at the hospital. I've toured the place. Just so
to
we're
make sure that
crystal
only
clear.
The raffle winner can make it into the birthing room. So, I just wanted to go ahead and address that last episode was on Worf, and we played a kingdom that had Worf. And this episode, what we're going to get into is two cards that are Margrave and Tragic Hero. We're going to talk about those in this episode.
Yeah.
And not necessarily because we look at those as the same card, but because
they're mostly the same card.
Right. And most of their text is the same. It's a little over half. I think Adam has a more precise figure for
55.
you. Anyway, so we're going to talk about those, but first we are going to, as always, talk about a kingdom that we played. We talked about it at the end of last podcast and played it over this week that has Worf in it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you want me to read the cards?
You can do it or I can do it. I don't care, man.
I'll do it.
All
right, we got Alchemist, Dungeon, Menagerie, Oracle, Temple, Butcher, Cursed Village, Library, Treasury, and Wharf. Once again, for our audio-only listeners, Alchemist, Dungeon, Menagerie, Oracle, Temple, Butcher, Cursed Village, Library, Treasury, and Wharf.
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting that we had a few different decks talked about in the Discord. I think what we advocated for was assuming that both players were going to go for Worf and that the Worf split was going to be important, except that we purposely forced in a village that's terrible for Worf just to see if we could make it not good.
Actually, before this game, every single time I've seen Worf with a village, it was worth it to go for multiple Worfs a turn.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure of that. And, like, this is definitely not... not this time. That's definitely bad. And, like, I saw it and I was like, I know Cursed Village is awful, but it's still got to be good because Worf is amazeballs. And it was... I tried that. It was real bad.
So, I think that even if just because it's Cursed Village and Wharf, I don't think that that's the only reason that it's bad.
I think that is 55% of the reason that it's bad.
I think that part of the other reason is that the deck that is using Cursed Village and Cursed Village alone for draw has a lot of support and has another endgame path that's pretty viable is also a really big reason that you don't necessarily just draw with Wharf, because the aspect of trashing with Temple and also butchering things that you maybe gain in play that turn is a very real strategy on this board, and Wharf doesn't factor into any of that. You don't get the plus buy if you don't go for the Wharf, but you don't
really need it if you're playing enough butchers every turn.
Yeah, instead of the plus buy, you use butcher gains, and that's kind of the same thing once the deck gets up and running enough.
Yeah, so like this deck really only uses 4 of the cards. Mm-hmm. It uses Temple for thinning, and it uses Cursed Village and Butcher as kind of the meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
And then Dungeon plays a pretty pivotal support role, not unlike a delicious gravy.
Yeah.
That would go. So like the Temple is for thinning, so that's like how you purge before a big meal. And then the meat.
We're just assuming that you're purging before the meal,
and you do that in the Temple.
Yeah,
and then the Butcher in the Cursed Village. The Butcher handles the meat, obviously, and the Dungeon is where the gravy comes from, because that's the kind of gruel that they eat in the Dungeon. Yeah. And so by process of elimination, we can conclude that the Cursed Village got to be that way because of potatoes.
And the Wharf would be like a fork. Normally something that's really useful that you need for like almost every meal you would eat, except you're eating a sandwich and you're like, well, I just don't have a place for you.
I just described like a meat and potatoes with gravy.
Yeah, I don't... Whatever, it's fine.
So I was thinking maybe like vegetables, but then I was like, well, this is America, and we're purging before this meal, so there's really no need for vegetables.
Yeah, so there was the deck that... goes for playing a bunch of Cursed Villages throughout the turn to keep yourself going with actions and draw, and the main payload is being able to play Butchers. Sometimes you're just taking the coffers, usually you're trashing something. You're trashing copper into something else more often than I usually see people do it with Butcher. And you're using the Temple for thinning. The other deck, though, that is also actually pretty good is Wharf Big Money.
So... Wharf with just money is definitely better than trying to play multiple Wharfs a turn with Cursed Village. It's not close. And on a 5/2, it's actually kind of sort of competitive, although still probably not as good as this Cursed Village Butcher.
Well, the Wharf Big Money is pretty powerful, and it's pretty close to the Butcher shenanigans, so that if you get an opener that's way better for it, you maybe just go for it.
Maybe. I mean, 5/2 is pretty good for the other deck as well.
Getting to open with a Butcher is solid, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not... I wouldn't say that it's as good. I would say, I mean, you're rocking less than a 50% win rate by a considerable margin if you go for Wharf and Money.
Yeah.
On the other hand, this whole Butcher thing, I feel like the most critical support component is Dungeon. I feel like without Dungeon, this deck would be mostly Garbo.
Well, it'd be really unreliable, for sure.
Unreliable enough that it's not worth building. I also think that Dungeon really helps the payload. Like, the whole point of the deck is to be playing a lot of Butchers. So, like, I'm playing a lot of Butchers, getting a lot of coin tokens. I'm gaining #tactical temples.
Yeah.
When there's points on the pile, I could butcher a copper into a temple, not never. And then, but like, if you play 3 or 4 Butchers a turn, it's going to be hard to lose that game.
This is true, and the other thing that matters is, of course, the endgame posturing, because whenever people are being able to play multiple Butchers a turn, you have to understand that the game could be over before you're comfortable with it, because provinces can leave the pile very easily. So having a points lead from the temples is really non-trivial, because it makes it so your opponent has less freedom to mill provinces than you do. You know, that doesn't mean that you prioritize temples and take up all your terminal space with that, but there is definitely a balance to be struck between how much do I want to improve my deck versus how much do I want to make sure that I'm not in a bad endgame position because my opponent has a temple lead.
So the last thing that I want to talk about related to that deck. So, let's say we're going to build that deck, the whole Butcher Curse Village kind of deck.
Sure.
How would you open deck?
We talked about this on the last podcast, too.
And there was some discussion in the Discord channel
Yeah.
about how wrong I was when I said that I wanted to open Temple Silver for that deck. And I'm going to stick to my guns.
So
I actually think Silver is a much better opening for that deck. And I played it many, many times, and not a single time...
Well, and you did both openers, too. Like, to be fair.
Right, but I tracked which card I would have rather had.
Yeah.
In every situation.
He went with the dungeon, he went with the silver, he did both.
And every single time, there wasn't a single time where I, would have rather had a dungeon. There was one time where that card missed the shuffle, and it didn't matter. And every other time, 5 out of 6, silver was actually better.
You're not hitting 5 if you open Temple Dungeon. I mean, you might, but it's really unlikely. So...
And you were going to hit 5 if you had opened Silver Dungeon.
Right. So, I still advocate for Temple Dungeon, and...
I think it's just not good.
So,
it's not as good.
But I understand where Adam's coming from, and to his credit, he did do a lot of analysis with both of the openers, and he's decided that Silver's better in every way. I think, though, that...
I'm not going to say it's better in every way.
In a lot of ways.
I think you're more likely to have a draw where Silver works out for you.
Sure.
Than Dungeon.
The Dungeon Temple opener is what I like because it helps you cycle to your temple more. For this deck that we're talking about, thinning fast is non-trivial, and getting to the point where you can gain and play is pretty good, especially when you're gaining temples and then trashing the temples to get another 5 cost or something like that. So I advocate for the Temple Dungeon, but even at that point, I pick up the silver in the next shuffle. So what this comes down to is, because I do want to hit 5 someday, is how important it is to hit 5 in the first 4 turns, and also which card is better for the deck in those first 4 turns. And I really like being able to play the Temple more with the Dungeon, but I understand where the silver plays a role too.
So I don't really think playing the Temple many times is really the most important thing. In fact, I think your argument should be, I want a lot of dungeons in the deck because that's what makes the deck go. And, that would be an argument for opening dungeon because I just want a high quantity of those in the deck. Now, granted, you're going to need at least 1, possibly 2 silvers to hit 5 because you're going to have to do that, right? So you're going to need the silvers, so why would you open with one over the other? And I think it just comes down to the idea that, I want to hit 5. I want to get a Butcher in my deck. I want to get a Cursed Village. Actually, we probably want the Cursed Village first, but it depends. But I want to get one of those cards in my deck because my turns can start being a lot more meaningful, and I can just shove dungeons in the deck in the meantime. I think hitting 5 earlier because of that silver, instead of prioritizing, I'm going to make sure I play a temple and trash an estate and a copper as much as I can, and not even pick up a 3 cost at the expense of that. I think it's just way worse. Yeah, I think with a silver in your deck, you give yourself the shot of trashing 2 cards with your temple and still getting that dungeon.
That's true. All of what Adam's saying is valid. I was operating under the assumption getting the dungeon that cycling through to the dungeon and the temple faster were going to be more helpful for thinning the deck, and that would be really important. But it does keep you from hitting 5 very quickly. So these are things to keep in mind. The other thing that is interesting is what your first 5 cost is. I'm going to say that it should be Butcher, but I've heard compelling arguments that it should be Cursed Village.
I think it's one of the 2, for sure. They're the only 2 fivers you're getting. It depends on your situation, depends on when you've hit the 5, how many silvers in your deck, how many dungeons in your deck, how many estates you have left in your deck.
Man.
Right? You want Butcher targets.
I really think it's always the Butcher, though. Honestly, because...
I think it's more often the Butcher, but I certainly don't think it's always the Butcher.
I can't think of a situation when I would shove a Cursed Village into the deck early when I wouldn't rather have a Butcher.
I have 2 silvers and I don't have any estates. I don't know. It's weird. There were some times in the video where I was like, yeah, I want the Cursed Village first.
How do you... But, you have 2 silvers and no estates. That means you have a temple that you are going to be wanting gone soon.
I think you were kind of... this is a bad place to be.
You trash the temple. Well, but then you butcher the temple into either another Butcher or Cursed Village, and I think you're better off. but I don't know.
Well, that's also true. I don't know that. Well, you can watch the video.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's more of a relevant place for that discussion. Also, I think if you're playing any other deck besides this, then you probably don't want to put a temple in that deck. You would rather use Butcher for estate trashing and just get a couple of dungeons. Tried a couple things there. I kind of like a double silver opening for those, but those decks aren't as good, so don't play those. But
yeah.
that was the deck I was talking about last time, and I was leaning towards a temple silver opening, and that's just whatever. The deck was bad, so of course my opening is not going to make sense if you're going for that.
If you're not doing the Butcher Shenanigan Curse Village Gazillion thing, that's what it's called.
That's such a good name for the deck.
I know.
I'm really glad you're calling it that.
Yeah, I know. I think you're just playing worth big money, personally. There's other things we can talk about comboing together, but I think those are the two decks that are good here.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
all right.
That was that. Yep. And I want to talk about, just us and the content we make in our role, We're silver truthers in a lot of ways.
Silver's a really good card.
Yeah,
I want people to know about it.
And to that end, we really make some sacrifices. You mean
like a 4-cost action?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like that.
Yeah.
But we're vilified by the community for wanting to bring the truth of silver out to you guys.
I really felt that in between these episodes.
Yeah, we get spat on by our peers, and we endure it to make sure that everybody knows how good silver is. And in a way, we're tragic heroes.
Yeah, we
of
really
the Dominion community.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to Making Luck, a tragic podcast. So speaking of segues, we are talking today about Tragic Hero, and we're talking about Margrave, too.
Hey, nice.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
So we, again, are not talking about these cards because they play differently, because they play the same. In fact, even though they have mostly the same text, the way that they play and the role they fill is actually worlds apart. So
#worlds apart, like that season of Survivor.
It's just like that.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking...
That was a terrible season. Don't watch it. It's just so bad. Anyway, continue.
So we're going to be talking about how these cards function and what their commonalities are, but then we're also going to talk about them individually and what their commonalities aren't and how they play differently. And it'll be a good time. It'll be a podcast about a card game.
Yeah. So why don't we each read the text of one of the cards?
Yeah.
Which one do you want?
Or we could alternate words. Like you could be like
we tried that. We tried
cards.
that and it failed really bad.
Okay, I want to read Tragic Hero.
I figured you would.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do Margrave.
Okay.
This is a 5-cost action from the Hinterlands expansion. It says +3 cards, +1 buy. And then each other player draws a card, then discards down to 3 cards in hand.
And the text of Tragic Hero, which is a 5-cost action from the Nocturne expansion, is +3 cards, +1 buy. Then, if you have 8 or more cards in hand after you've drawn, you trash this and gain a treasure. That is any treasure.
Delicious treasure.
Yeah, that delicious treasure.
Delish treasure.
Yeah. So, before we get into them individually, it's probably worth talking a little bit about how they are the same card. About talking just about this fictional card that is neither of them and is just a 5-cost action that says +3 cards and +buy.
That would be really good.
Yeah, Smithy is kind of OP.
It's it's OP. # please nerf. # Donald please. # Smithy is OP 2018.
Yeah. Drawing cards, it's good, and it's usually worth 5 to do it. And the
I
fact
would
that
pay 5 for Smithy, a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's the thing.
We kind of do that,
the
right?
Smithy
It
effect.
happens a lot.
Yeah, a lot of the time you're not using the other thing that the card does. Not with these necessarily, but you still buy it because drawing cards, with Journeyman or whatever, drawing cards is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should try drawing. If you haven't tried drawing cards, give it a shot.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Life. So the fact that this has +buy on it is important too, because we touched on this in the Wharf episode, but whenever you have something a single card that increases your hand size and gives you +buy, you have to understand that those are two of the biggest things you look for when you're deciding what your best turns look like. When you're deciding, Do you want to go for a province per turn, or do you want to do more than that? If there is a single card in the kingdom that gives you 2 of the biggest things that you need, it's probably pushing you away from a money deck, away from just consistently provincing early and often, and toward this higher payload deck that really seeks to do more with its turns. And that one kingdom card really does a lot to push you there.
If there's nothing else, you can just draw a whole bunch of treasures and then buy multiple things with the treasures.
It's real good to do that.
You don't really need any other kind of payload. I mean, other payload is great. Don't get me wrong, but like just having that buy, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Basically what we're saying is you're going to buy these like a lot of the time, and they're good for a variety of decks too. Even though we said that they push you away from big money, they also tend to be really good in big money, and so you will you'll very rarely see one of these cards on the board and not have it see some role, some function to play, whether it's the plus buy or the increased hand size. Both of those are fantastic for a really high payload deck.
Fantastic for just about every deck.
Yeah. So, what's missing then?
Well, I mean, I want to be able to buy a lot of things and have a lot of cards. And so, if I can play more than one of these a turn, I can do even more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a village.
Yeah, village support is what really the last component that's missing to just do everything a Dominion deck might need to do.
It's like you have this beautiful piece of fish in front of you.
Yes.
And like you could have like a piece of tilapia, or maybe a piece of red snapper.
Yeah.
Or whatever kind of fish you like, and it's been seared with a nice crispy skin. Well, maybe not the tilapia, but the red snapper has a nice crispy skin, or there's a nice sear on there, seasoned simply but elegantly, salt, pepper, dill, nothing fancy. And you're eating it, and you're like, I mean, this is great, but I just want a lemon wedge.
Yeah, where's the lemon? Where's the lemon wedge? And just like that. A village is a lemon wedge.
Like the lemon wedge.
And you wouldn't get the lemon wedge by itself. You wouldn't just eat a lemon wedge.
But I'm weird because I do that.
Yeah, these cards are obviously really good with village support because that fills in the only hole that they have. And if you have that, they become, that really just determines what kind of deck you're building. If you see a village support with these, that's really enough.
Village and Smithy together was already good.
If you add plus buy-in to the mix,
that's super great.
So let's assume we don't have that village support and we're looking for our one true terminal to be playing, or to give a little shout out, our real true terminal. And
yeah, the RTT. Sometimes I can even hear his voice.
Sometimes. Yeah. So let's say we're looking for that real true terminal, and we are evaluating cards on that kingdom. I will say that in that case, if you can only play one of them, the Margrave shines a lot brighter than the Tragic Hero.
Yeah, a lot of the reason why these cards are good is because it's just a whole bunch of cards in your hand. So if I can make my opponent have 2 less cards, it's going to get a lot worse for them, particularly because it's going to be harder to take advantage of that plus buy. I'm not going to have 7 cards to work with. I'm going to have only 5, and that makes me a little sad.
Yeah, definitely. As we transition into talking about Margrave specifically, it's worth noting that when we are talking about the lack of village support, even though Margrave loves village support, if you don't have it, Margrave is one of the better terminals out there to play as your only one. It's a fine... You get a lot of value, sort of like how we talked about the first Goons you play has a lot of value. The first Margrave you play has a lot of value, too.
Yeah, discard attacks tend to work that way.
Yeah, because they only happen once.
So, there's one other thing I want to point out. There's an obvious comparison to Council Room. Council Room draws you 4 cards and gives you a buy. Costs the same.
Sure.
And, that's true. On the other hand, it does draw your opponent a card. So unless you're going to discard attack them afterward, these Margrave and Tragic Hero, these are going to just be higher quality cards in general. Just because drawing me a card and drawing you a card, that may seem like a symmetrical effect, but it's actually not that great. because the opponent, the card that I make my opponent draw is going to be much better for them because it's at the start of their turn.
Sure,
This
definitely.
is rolling in concepts from last episode. Even the fact that I'm making a council room comparison at all.
Yeah, and Margrave has some other effects that tie into that too, for sure. Especially when you get into the situation where you're playing more than one of them per turn.
Right. It could be said that the first Margrave I play on someone hurts them, and all the subsequent ones will. I mean, it won't hurt them anymore, and in some cases, it could help them.
Right. So the other thing with Margrave is that it is a card that gives you a really strong incentive to get it early and play it early if you can, and that's because it's a discard attack that costs 5.
It costs a lot.
Yeah, any discard attack that costs 5 or more has that effect because it can deprive your opponent of getting one. Like most of the, or at least with like Torturer, if you need to hit 5, you can like take a curse or something. But with Margrave, and the only other one I can think of that is like this is like Sir Michael from the Knight's Pile.
Yeah, or like Goons.
Sure, like Goons. Goons is harder to get to this point.
Right.
Really.
That makes it even more significant.
Right. So any discard attack like that you can be the first one to start playing makes it really likely that you delay your opponent from being able to get it, and that just gives you a lot of time to increase the distance between you two if you get an early lead that way.
Yeah, it feels bad, and I have to say that a lot of games with Margrave in them, since you're trying to build this deck that plays a decent number of Margraves and draws a bunch of cards. Not being able to play a Margrave for a while because my opponent's playing Margraves, that's game decisive a lot of the time.
It certainly can be. If your opponent... Margrave can be a bit of a runaway leader card.
For sure.
It can be a card that once your opponent gets his deck up and running, the Margrave attack stops hurting quite as much. It's not nothing, but it certainly is most impactful early on when the Margrave attack is keeping your opponent from getting Margraves.
For sure. I mean, yeah, it's definitely true, and that makes me sad.
It's a sad day. So we talk about these decks that are really enabled by these two cards we're talking about, with the plus cards and the plus buy, and these high payload decks can use Margrave as their only draw. Like, that's perfectly viable, especially if you have that village support. But they really don't want to. If they can get away with it.
I'm gonna be happy to do it, right? I want to draw a buttload of cards and have a lot of buys, and so I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna be happy doing it.
Sure, but you'd rather there was some other source of draw. The ideal case for Margrave is that you play it exactly one time every turn, I'd say.
For sure. Like, if Margrave and Smithy were on the board,
you want to have a bunch of Smithies. Yeah.
And then I would have one or maybe two Margraves in case, like, my deck wasn't reliable and I wanted to make sure I increased the shot of, like, playing a Margrave on him every turn. Or maybe I need the second buy or whatever.
The literal reason why this is the case is obvious.
Hashtag literal reason.
In that these things that they just let your opponent draw a discard, but how important this is and why it's like as influential as it is I think really interesting, and it leads us to examine some more fundamental aspects of Dominion and of discard attacks. Part of the reason the main reason that 3-card hands are bad is because they make it less likely that you have all the cards you need to do what you want to do with your turn, or kick off, as it were.
Sure, the start of my turn is going to be a lot worse with 3 cards than 5 cards.
Which is to say, it follows then that if your turn goes ahead and kicks off anyway, if the start of your turn being worse didn't make the overall turn worse, then the discard attack didn't really do anything.
Well, I'm not going to say it did nothing. I mean, I had to draw 2 more cards if I want to draw everything.
Yeah.
So that's not nothing, and it's kind of a pain. But
it's not the point of the attack.
That's a lot better of a situation for me, just having to draw 2 extra cards, than it would be if my turn just sucked and wasn't successful in general.
Yeah, for sure. And in some cases, the Margrave attack, helping your opponent draw discard, it can kind of mitigate itself if you play multiple Margraves, because the whole point of this discard attack was to make their starting hand worse, and sometimes if you play enough of them, they end up with the cards they need to have the best turn they could have anyway.
Yeah, so like there's this extreme example, like let's say I have a deck with 55 estates and 3 golds, and and you play, I mean, if you play enough Margraves on me, I'm going to have the best possible turn because of that.
Sure, yeah, this deck that he's talking about, this fictional deck that has 55 estates and the 3 golds in it, we wouldn't think about that as a good deck. We wouldn't think that that deck would hit Province, but if you play enough Margraves on it every turn, it's going to hit Province every single turn.
But like, why would you want to hit Province with that deck? You already have exactly 55 points. Why would you want to change that?
Yeah, I know. And obviously that deck doesn't exist. It's illustrative, though. The thing is that this applies on a smaller scale as well. This is going to apply to your games that have Margrave too. And it's going to... If you're not paying attention and you're not being careful and you're playing Margraves on your opponent, you might find that their decks are capable of things that you didn't see coming. It looks like good luck for them when you're on the other end of it sometimes. If you're not aware of this, it looks like your opponent's just having amazingly good luck. But remember that your opponent's...
Not only make your own shuffle luck.
You make your opponent's, too. Your opponent's deck being really crappy means a lot less if you're playing a bunch of Margraves.
So I think the most practical example of this kind of thing I can think of is with King's Court.
Sure.
If I'm using King's Court and Margrave as my source of draw, I'm going to be doing the Margrave thing to my opponent many times, and as such, they are likely to be able to find King's Court, Margrave to start their turn.
Yeah.
So if you're going to sit there and wonder how they got so lucky, wow, they didn't stall at all, this is bullcrap.
Well, you helped.
Yeah, you helped.
And that's not to say don't do it, though. The thing is, we said that Margrave prefers not to be the only source of draw, but it can be, and that's fine. The thing is that if that is happening, if you are playing a bunch of Margraves on your opponent's turn, you're not actually slowing them down, really. In many cases, you might be speeding them up. Essentially, when multiple Margraves are being played every turn, you need to understand that really makes the decks more consistent, not less, like another discard attack might.
Consistent in inverted commas.
Yeah, consistent in being able to have the turn they want to have.
That's slightly worse than having 5 cards and the ones they want. But still,
right.
Yes, consistent,
Sure.
For sure.
Yeah, you need to understand and play around this, that if you're playing a bunch of Margraves on your opponent every turn, that they are a lot less likely to stall than they would be if you weren't doing that. So That doesn't, again, mean don't do it. It means play as if that's going to happen, and a lot of the time that actually means greening a lot earlier in multi-Margrave games. That means like getting a lead on those points, and that's, again, mitigated as well by your opponent playing a bunch of Margraves on you so you draw discard them.
Sure. Yeah.
So, as general as that advice can be, just play around it.
Yeah, sure. I don't think I have anything else to add for Margrave.
No, that's that card's pretty well covered, I'd say.
It's really, really strong.
Yeah, it's a very strong card.
9 out of 10.
So Tragic Hero is another card, and...
Hey there, Jon Snow. How's it going?
Adam calls it Jon Snow. I'm not actually sure why. I bet I'll get the reference later. I'm caught up on Game of Thrones.
If you're caught up on Game of Thrones, I mean, every time I play him and I have more than 8 cards in hand, I say, "For the watch!" as I throw him in the trash. Like,
oh, you're making like a reference from like 3 seasons ago.
Right.
Okay.
And then if there's Rogue in the Kingdom,
you gain him back, and then it's like,
yeah.
So, I will say this. Tragic Hero is quickly becoming my favorite card in the game.
Oh, wow. Does Toby know?
So, forever it was Rats. Like, since Dark Ages came out, my favorite card has been Rats. And maybe they're my favorite cards for different reasons, so maybe I'm just growing up.
I mean, Toby's a lot cuter than this guy.
Yeah.
I'm not really into facial hair, so that's
Well,
my own
we'll have
personal
to
bias.
ask our girlfriends / wives.
She's
Anyway.
My wife is still my girlfriend. She just is also my wife. She didn't stop being my girlfriend because I married her.
Leave a comment. Anyway, so Tragic Hero again is really like my favorite card in the game. I just love games with it because I think it's so well designed and interesting. You read it the first time and it like doesn't seem like it would be good unless you're Tom Vassell.
So you already, so this is the first card you play and you draw 3 cards. That won't be enough. You'll have 7 in your hand, so you need another way to draw cards for this to work.
And and then you play a few games with it and you realize, oh my god, this is good like all the time. And it's, oh man, where
It's
Margrave,
got 3 cards in a buy, so it's gonna be pretty good.
sure, but even like the extra effect of it, like that extra thing that only it does. See, where Margrave delivers this negative effect to your opponent, Tragic Hero
Delivers the negative effect to you, yeah.
No, Tragic Hero gives a positive effect for you, which means you're usually a lot happier with the situation where you're playing multiple of them. Like, for obvious reasons, you'd rather be playing a bunch of Tragic Heroes than a bunch of Margraves.
On that one turn.
Yeah. Right, sure.
So if you care about being able to have many good turns...
Well, that's the thing, is that Tragic Hero reminds us of one of my favorite Dominion lessons, which is that your deck doesn't need to last forever. It just needs to win you the game.
Okay.
And that's why playing a deck that is drawing a bunch with Tragic Hero and utilizing that trash effect and really just having a good time is...
Playing a lot of action cards.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like the decks that are relying on Madman for draw, in that you're trying to build up to these really big turns, the few and far between but very high impact turns that like swing the game in a huge way, or maybe even outright win you the game. I'd almost call them a mega turn, but I'd say that Tragic Hero is building up to a few of those, so you'd have a mini mega turn. A few mini mega turns.
Yeah, mini megas.
Yeah, mini megas.
So I actually understand the type of deck you're talking about, and you were outlining and I was outlining. Well, thought outlining, and I actually thought of comparing Tragic Hero to like that kind of Hermit Market Square mega turn.
Yeah.
Where you play a bunch of madmen and then you do some cool stuff, and then afterwards you're kind of left with this deck if you didn't end the game. Of course,
Yeah.
Hermit Madman is super strong, so maybe not being as strong as Hermit Madman is not uncommon. But you're left with this deck that has a good amount of good treasures in it,
Sure.
and then a couple of other good cards that are also good in the deck that give you some plus buy.
And
So,
you know
like,
what's real good in that deck?
silver.
Plus 3 cards plus buy.
Right, that's what I was referencing.
Yeah, so Tragic Heroes get really good to keep adding to that deck too.
Well, I mean, you're going to have a couple of them left after that
Yeah.
big turn, right? Because
Probably.
not all of them get for the watched.
Yeah.
But that's similar to the market squares that are left over in your Hermit Madman deck.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a pretty decent deck moving forward after this really great turn that you've spent a while building up to.
Right. And a lot of the time, and when I say that we're building to the mini megas, I'm just talking about like common use cases. There are certainly Tragic Hero mega turns that are very viable. I think Tragic Hero is one of those cards that a lot of the time you can look at and start thinking mega turn. It's a little trickier to set it up because you have to be balancing how many Tragic Heroes are left in your deck versus relative payload versus village support, and can I line it up in the right ways. But it can definitely be a mega turn card in the same vein as Bridge or Bridge Troll or Horn of Plenty.
It certainly has some burst capability. So when you play that Tragic Hero and you upgrade it into a treasure,
Yeah.
and then you presumably draw and play that treasure on the same turn, because
Right.
otherwise you didn't really upgrade it, right? It's just kind of different.
Yeah.
It's just different, and you didn't really get the benefit of playing the Tragic Hero and also play. That goes back to the reason why Procession was really good, when you can draw and play the thing that you gained, right?
Yeah.
So you can have these turns that are a little bit bigger because you blew up your Tragic Hero, and then your deck composition is a little bit different because of it.
Sure.
And so that burst potential is, that's when Tragic Hero's good, right? That's when I put my Tom Vassal hat on, and that's
now
thinking about the card that way.
And obviously, this is amazing with things like Platinum or Bank in the Kingdom. But golds work just fine for this. You don't need Platinum or Bank to make this a valid Mega Turn strategy.
What about rocks?
And rocks. Yes.
I'm gonna turn Jon Snow into a bunch of rocks.
Yeah, there we go.
Theme. Woo! So I think, like you have this very optimistic viewpoint of Tragic Hero. And don't get me wrong, I think that Kit Harington is very attractive when he shaves. So
Sure.
like there's a difference in perspective here, and I think I want to try and put my thumb on what makes these differences happen.
Yeah,
So,
there's the idealized text. Is that what you're talking about?
idealized text.
Yeah,
I think that's a lot closer to what you're saying, right?
Sure.
Where you're thinking, oh, I draw 3 cards and I get a buy, and one of those cards was a treasure that I didn't even start with, and didn't make my deck less reliable at the start of the turn, like Gain and Play would do for you.
Like in the ideal dream cases of Tragic Hero, what you are getting the card to read plus 2 cards plus buy plus $3 for the rest of the game. And what you...
That's...
Well, because it stays in your deck. And
you never have to draw it.
No, but that's the thing, is that is not literally what the card says, but getting the text of Tragic Hero closer to that dream is what you're going for to play Tragic Hero well, and it is telling you a lot about how to pilot that deck and a lot about what the strength of the card is and where it lies.
Sure. So the assumption that I pointed out there is that you're swimming in draw, right?
Yeah, which you might be because you have Tragic Hero.
Well, you might be. However, to be consistently swimming in draw is not something you can do if you trashed all of your Tragic Heroes. So that's I'm putting my thumb on this. I'm saying that you're going to need a source of draw other than Tragic Hero to get Tragic Hero's text to be close to that.
Sure.
If Tragic Hero is your only source of draw, you're going to have a lot of trouble making that happen.
Or you are going to need to have that burst potential lead to that effective game-winning turn, to the point that it doesn't matter that you don't have draw anymore.
Okay, then if that's the case, then it also needed to not matter that you didn't have other draw all the way up to that point. And by other draw, I mean a Tragic Hero that puts you up to 8 or more cards in hand, right?
Yeah, right.
So you can play one of them, but if you want to play more than one of them, then you're gonna have to pilot it like this draw to X deck that like, oh well, I can't go above 8 cards in hand, and Tragic Hero doesn't do that for you, right? It's not like a library that's going to stop when it's done, which, I mean, Tragic Hero is good because it doesn't do that, but it also, the safety belt's off, man.
Yeah.
If I'm just playing my cards, and I play a Tragic Hero, and that was too many cards, then it's gone.
In practice...
Ollie just stabbed Jon Snow in the heart with tears in his eyes, and that can't be undone unless there's Rogue or Grave Robber or Lurker, you know.
Yeah. I am actually starting to see your Jon Snow metaphor a little more clearly. But what I will say is that in practice, when you're piloting this Tragic Hero deck, I don't think I have ever done something that has purposely not blown up a Tragic Hero to gain a treasure. I'm sure it happens. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but I've never
If you're going to sit there and not play that Tragic Hero because you don't want to lose it,
well,
you are sad.
But
that is a sad thing.
It depends, obviously, on a lot, especially if you're close to drawing your deck and the turn isn't getting better by playing the Tragic Hero. Anyway...
But if you got there with Tragic Hero as your only draw, then either your deck is super tiny, or you've done some other shenanigans. So I'm saying this is a lot harder to do when Tragic Hero is your only source of draw.
Yeah, it definitely is, but also not impossible, just harder.
Correct.
And when Tragic Hero is the only draw, or it's the best source of draw, or the main one, the focus shifts from managing your Tragic Heroes to managing your endgame play and making sure that by the time your deck gets to this state where your draw is gone, because that is inevitable, that you have put yourself in the position to end or win the game. And
Or, like, have a bunch of points.
Yeah, effectively win or win. And what that comes down to a lot is managing basically how many treasures are in your deck, not by virtue of... and versus Tragic Heroes, and that management doesn't happen by virtue of not playing the Tragic Heroes. That comes in the form of deciding how many Tragic Heroes you buy on your turn. Because remember that these...
that you have in your deck at any given point.
Right, and usually you keep them in your deck by just buying new ones for the ones that blew up. Like, remember that this +3 cards and plus money and plus buy is helping you get more Tragic Heroes, and that's why Tragic Hero can ramp up to a mega turn.
Right. So that is leading right into the other thing that I wanted to put my thumb on. Mm-hmm. So I talked about you really want other sources of draw. You also want to have some other sources of plus buy. Because you're going to have a hard time getting into this situation and having it be not awful if your gains, not necessarily plus, some other source of gains. Sure. That you're going to have a hard time getting there without some other source of gains. Because now every gain that I spent, every time I spend one of those on a Tragic Hero, I'm really just banking it for later.
It's certainly trickier with Tragic Hero as the only source of what it does.
It's really hard for me to get Tragic Hero to be better than just the $5 and a buy I spent on it. I'm just playing it later and getting 3 cards that might be making me $5 and just getting that buy back. So I want to try and get away from that situation where Tragic Hero is not going to be very good there, and that's going to be much more difficult to do if there's no other gains besides Tragic Hero. At that point, why am I not just playing Tragic Hero big money? Because that's already pretty good, and I can maybe have some more gains there. And
I would say though that doesn't mean discount that deck if Tragic Hero is the only source of cards or gains, because that deck works in a different way when Tragic Hero is the only source of what it does. It just means you need to be more judicious with how you're managing the number of the Tragic Heroes in your deck, in the form of buying them back, and how few can you get away with buying back this turn and still make the deck kick off. In a lot of ways, starting the first time that you draw your deck with Tragic Hero, you can theoretically just start exponentially growing your turns.
Exponentially.
Well,
wow.
Multiplicatively, at least.
That's still really impressive.
Well, yeah, because you can... theoretically, each Tragic Hero gets you most of the way to buying a new Tragic Hero. So
that's just like, kind of the same. How is it getting better every turn?
Well,
you have some other support, right?
Yeah.
So, if I'm looking for other support, at the top of the list is other gains. And at the top of the list is other sources of draw if I want to have sustainable good turns.
I'm going to put something else at the top of the list.
Right, there's more stuff. Go.
The top of the list.
Oh, wow.
With Tragic
that's
Hero,
a lot of tops.
Like the tip top
the
is
tip-top.
the
Hashtag
Throne Room
tip-top.
family. The Throne Room family dials Tragic Hero up to 11 because it plays each Tragic Hero multiple times. You gain 2 treasures, and you draw one of them that turn. So it takes, and it doubles the buys from each Tragic Hero. So it takes the problems from that Tragic Hero has and just solves, almost all of them immediately.
So it gives you additional cards.
Yeah.
And it gives you additional buys.
Sure.
So, it is both of the things that we wanted.
Yeah.
Because Throne Room is great, and King's Court is great, and Procession is great because you were gonna throw him, you were gonna for the watch him anyway.
Yeah.
So you might as well get a 6er for it, right?
If one exists, sure.
Maybe, yeah, sure. You're gonna turn him into a frickin' altar or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
That's thematic. Jon Snow, something. Yeah.
Yeah. If you see Tragic Hero with a Throne Room variant, I'd say you kind of just go for it. Not blindly. Obviously, look at the other cards in the kingdom.
Yeah, it's a village, too, which we said was great.
That's an extremely powerful combination, and you should start thinking about that mega turn if you see Tragic Hero with a Throne Room variant that's available on the board.
And, anything, really.
Yeah, it's not always going to be the best strategy 100% of the time, but it's so good so much of the time that it deserves your attention.
Tragic Hero, Kit Harington, he deserves my attention, let me tell you.
Definitely.
If he shaves.
If he shaves.
Yeah. It's just personal preference, okay?
Yep.
here on Making Luck, we're okay with objectifying men.
Yeah.
Because this is 2018, right?
And we're comfortable with our own masculinity and our place in the world.
I mean, okay, let me be honest. My celebrity crush is Tom Hanks. But if it wasn't Tom Hanks, I actually haven't thought about it, but Kit Harington might be on that list. I'd have to think about it. Don't hold me back. Tom Hanks for life.
Well, yeah. Anyway.
So anyway, this plays a lot differently. This is good in different situations in Margrave, and the kind of support you're going to want to find to make this better is much different than the kind of support that you want from Margrave, which is just find a village.
Yeah.
And play it.
Sure.
I would also venture to say Venture's not very good support because, if you're going to draw a whole bunch of stuff, you're not going to have anything to venture.
Venture's also...
That's not where I was going with this, though. But.
I actually, I was curious because I've never really felt like I knew how to play with Venture, so I reached out to both our community and our Discord and the Dominion Discord and asked, like, hey, what do you guys think about Venture?
And they're like, it sucks.
Yeah, pretty much everyone across the board just said, yeah, it's just bad. So I feel a lot better that I'm not missing something.
Well, anyway, where I was originally going to say about Venture, I would venture to say that Margrave is, in general, a stronger card than Tragic Hero. Mm-hmm. Just because Margrave is busted as fudge.
And I'm going to disagree
Tragic
with
Hero's
that.
only, solid.
So here's the thing, and Adam and I have had a few lively debates on this.
We cut short so we could have them here on the podcast right now. Welcome to Making Luck, a lively debate podcast. Go.
I don't think that Tragic Hero is any weaker than Margrave. I think that it is different. I think that what it does is very different, and the phase of the game where it's important is different. Margrave is very important at the beginning of the game, and becomes less important later on as people build their decks, whereas Tragic Hero becomes a lot less important toward the beginning of the game. It doesn't really dictate the opener or control your opponent or anything like that, but it is a viable path to endgame dominance.
So I think everything you said is accurate with one exception, and that exception being that it all means that Margrave isn't just stronger than Tragic Hero. I think all that means that both of them are good and Margrave is way stronger, because controlling your opponent, attacking them early on, being important early on is in general just really a lot more important.
But once your opponent gets to the point where he can deal with the Margrave attack, Margrave's role has kind of been lessened.
Because the game is already decided, yeah.
I don't think that that's the case. You can get to a point where you recover from the Margrave attack, either because you drew your deck.
Let's play 10 games, either because maybe one of them.
Either because you drew your deck, or because you got to the point where those 3 cards were enough to kick your turn off. And at that point, the Tragic Hero, obviously we're talking about this, situation where Tragic Hero and Margrave are facing off, but
that's not necessarily what I was saying, and I think that's a huge point that makes a lot of this discussion, why does it matter? It's what does it mean for a card to be good?
Yeah,
and
right.
We're talking about 2 completely different things, right?
Yeah. And
you're saying Tragic Hero is because of this, and you're right. And I'm saying Margrave is good because of this, and I'm also right.
This is
true.
And
so, we can have completely differing opinions on how good that makes either of the cards and how to compare the 2. But really, when you compare 2 cards and you ask which one of them is better, what does that even mean? And how do you even determine which one is better?
So actually,
most of the time it's not.
Well, I will say this, and that is that a lot of what anyone is talking about at all when they say this card is better than this card, really the only point they're making is about their mental model of the game. Is about how their conception of the game is. We get crap a lot of the time for saying that silver is a good card when people think we mean that your 10th silver is a good card. No, your first silver is a really good card.
Your 10th silver could be good, but that's probably less often than your first silver being good,
and
which is pretty much always.
When we say silver is a good card, a lot of the time what we're saying is silver helps you accomplish your goals. And
it's a good card.
Yeah, so what that doesn't mean good card to a lot of people though, and so that's And not
That's
to keep
weird
coming,
to me.
Yeah,
that's not wrong. It's just weird to me.
and not to keep coming back to the silver thing, but it's interesting when we call something a good card or a bad card, what we tend to mean by that, yeah?
I remember, so like I had these card power level polls that I'd done. I published a couple things on the blog related to that. And, you know, I ask people to rate how powerful a card is. And, you know, they give me, it's a scale from 0 to 10. And they give me a number. One of 11 numbers. They give it to me.
Yeah.
And, like, I give them suggestions about, like, oh, this is what I think a 0 is, and a 1, and a 3, 5, 7, a 9, and a 10. And I give a couple of examples of, like, things that, oh, maybe these cards would be like that, and I describe that. But, like, I'm not the authority on that.
No, I mean, nobody is, because you can't be an authority on something that's subjective.
Well, I mean, you can, but no one cares.
Yeah. Yeah, so it really comes down again
So I
to...
guess you're not an authority in that case.
Yeah, the point of a card being better or worse really is really more of a point about how you think about the game and your mental model of it. Yeah. Because, like, a lot of people would say that, like, Chariot Race is a better card than Silver, but man, if I open Silver and you open Chariot Race... I like my odds.
Yeah,
but
and the fact that you
things.
and how enthusiastic you are about opening with a card is the only factor in how strong it is.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Because that matters.
Yeah.
So like I gave Margrave like a 9 out of 10, and I think I gave like Tragic Hero maybe like a 7. I don't remember. Let's say I gave it a 7. And what would you give Margrave and Tragic Hero out of 10? Just pull it out of your rectum.
Yeah, if I'm gonna give them both an 8. Because...
And we're both right about everything.
Yeah. No, and like...
It's okay!
And, like, that's not... But the thing is, like, that... You'll see Margrave deciding more games at the beginning.
Yeah, and I gave it a higher number because of that. And you didn't.
And you'll see Tragic Hero being more important consistently through, like, the later half of most games.
I don't know that I would say it that strongly. But
I mean, with a village, I'd say.
More than Margrave.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that said, we have a kingdom for you that has Tragic Hero and Margrave in it.
That was a lively little discussion.
Yeah, so, and it ends
with... You feel good?
Yeah, and it ends with us doing the thing that we said doesn't prove anything, where we have Margrave and Tragic Hero in the same kingdom. But that's actually just because we thought we could put them in the kingdom and it wouldn't be a bad game because of it.
For the record, Jake thought that, and I was like, really? Let me just show you a couple of them. And then we rolled one of them, and we were both like, yeah, this one's fine. Let's go for it.
Yeah, totally.
So that's how that happened.
Yeah, so...
Read me some cards, man.
Yeah, so what we have in this kingdom is City Quarter, Encampment with Plunder behind it, Catapult with rocks behind them, Hermit, Conspirator, Crown, Margrave, Tragic Hero, Witch, and Grand Market. And we also have the event Traveling Fair. Once more for our audio-only listeners, we have City Quarter, Encampment with Plunder behind it, Catapult with rocks behind it, Hermit, Conspirator, Crown, Margrave, Tragic Hero, Witch, and Grand Market. And we also have the event Traveling Fair.
All right. Look at that. Margrave and good old Johnny Snow.
Oh, boy, man.
I'm never calling him that again. That was weird. Good old Jon Snow.
Yeah, so you open City Quarter, but...
You can't do that.
Yeah. All right. So
you know, I did see, one time I did see a guy open City Quarter, turn 1, and he won that game. To be fair...
So it has to be good.
There were shelters. Okay. So you had the Necropolis.
Nice.
So anyway, this board, which is a junking attack, and you probably want to get that because it's kind of annoying to trash the curses.
Yeah, I mean Hermit's pretty good at doing it. And
it's like okay, but I think I still.
But it's not great. I
still want to go for that lady. What's her name? Like Stephanie or something?
Mathilde.
Well, that was Sieg.
No, this is just Mathilde.
Stephatilde.
Yeah, Stephatilde.
Yeah.
So
good old Stephatilde.
Yeah, I wish we had Steph. I wish Steph had, like, an avatar or something. So, like, when we say Stephatilde, we could put Steph's.
I mean, he traditionally goes for wishing well, but I was definitely not thinking of Steph when I said Stephanie.
Stephatilde.
Like, that's clearly a woman in the picture.
That's true. But
I don't think that he looks like that. I also don't think that wishing well looks like that.
one would assume not. But
Well, I just said it, so you don't have to assume it anymore.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, you get the witch, and you're happy about it because the junking
Curses
attack
suck,
is
man.
it's going to slow your opponent down, especially when the only trashing is terminal, and it trashes a card. So, yeah, it's a significant cost to have to trash a curse.
For surezies.
Yeah.
So I think I want to open with Hermit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good card to open with. I think I'm gonna get the Catapult. I don't know. I might get the silver. It's tough because like you're gonna want to trash those coppers. The deck you eventually want to build here draws a whole bunch of cards, plays a bunch of Grand Markets and Conspirators, and you know.
I don't know if you get there actually, and I have some theories.
Hold on, we rolled this with Platinum and Colony, didn't we?
We did.
We did, and that's not on here.
Well, I was actually
We
going to
didn't
ask
say
you if
that.
you wanted to. So this board may or may not have Platinum Colony as well.
We rolled it with Platinum Colony. I just didn't put it on. This
Okay,
picture.
so
Sorry.
we'll go ahead and it has
My bad.
Platinum Colony as well.
My bad.
But so you get the thing with the
You get the thing with the stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's
get-
what I was gonna say.
you get
You
the
wanna
Hermits
play-
and the Catapults. Yeah,
You want to play a lot of Grey Markets and Conspirators, and you don't
I
want your
don't know about
coppers
that.
getting in the way. I think you... I mean, that's the deck that you want to build. The fact that those cards are there means that you can justify building a whole bunch instead of doing some aggro pile thing.
so
Yeah,
here
the curses are going to run. Blah, blah. Go ahead.
I don't know that you have time for Grand Market. I don't know that you are going to have time for Conspirator either. You might get a few, though, just in the middle. You might get a few Grand Markets for this same reason, but I think that the deck you want to build has some city quarters that it uses to draw back up after you got discard attack, because that's
Yeah,
going to happen.
for sure.
And then relies on crowning Tragic Heroes to gain platinums in this case, and have giant turns. And I don't think you need to waste time with Grand Market. I really don't think you do, unless you need to build without lowering piles or something.
You want some other source of plus buy, though.
I mean, it's great
Crown
if you
is
do. I
there,
don't know if
but,
you
like-
need it. Like with Crown Tragic Hero and Margrave too.
So
You're gonna play a Margrave on your turn.
after I get my witch, I'm gonna get my Margrave. Discard attack is really brutal here.
Yeah.
City quarter's a big deal, and you know that hurts city quarter a lot. So, you know, I'm gonna want. I think we are in agreement that our first Margravero,
Our first five.
our first, well, after which,
Yeah.
the first one of those cards we're gonna get is a Margrave because the attack is super important.
Yes.
And you know, maybe I'm gonna switch over to Tragic Hero. Maybe I'm gonna rely more on City Quarter for draw. I think Conspirator's a really good card, and I think even if I'm going for Tragic Hero, I'm gonna build a core deck that has some Conspirators in it. Is gonna be generating me some money, so I have a platform upon which my Tragic Heroes can boost me. That
Sure.
Valyrian Steel Sword is now in the hands of my capable hero on a strong foundation
I understand what you're saying,
until
and
something tragic happens.
that deck is solid, and that deck will come together. What I posit is that the deck I'm talking about is going to win the game before that happens,
I feel like the game will
or
be...
effectively win the game.
I
at
feel
least.
like once one person has an advantage because of Witch and Margrave, that they're going to win no matter what they do, and Tragic Hero will have very little to do with it. So you can win that game with Tragic Hero, but you will have been able to win that game with whatever you want. Now, I think it's more efficient. I don't think it matters, but I think it's more efficient to shove some Conspirators in the deck. You're going to want some buys, so maybe you'll get enough from your Margrave, or maybe you'll find time for Grand Market. That's fine.
Yeah,
Or maybe a T-Fair. I don't know.
The Encampment Plunder thing is non-trivial as well. The
Encampment's a great card, and I'm going to gain the crap out of him with Hermits.
The encampments matter more than the plunders in this case, which is usually the opposite is true, I'd say. But
Colony's a big deal. It's a lot of points.
because Colony, the plunders are not super impactful.
Yeah, they matter for keeping encampments in your deck, but that's not, that's not a huge, groundbreaking thing that I just said.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, the Witch and the Margrave are definitely...
They're cards.
They're oppressive of a force to deal with. And
Big deal.
kind of Catapult to a degree, too.
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, you can get that same discard attack from Catapult. Actually, a better discard attack, but not as good of a card. So...
I mean, I'm going to want to use it to thin coppers, but at some point,
you're
I'm
gonna
going to
have a
stop
Catapult
wanting to
back.
throw away my entire turn just to, chuck a copper at my opponent, and I'm going to also want to do something productive, and so the Margrave is going to be relevant.
Yeah, I mean, the right time to add crowns to the deck is going to be interesting, too, because I think crown is the piece that really makes the deck come alive outside of the attacks. Like, the crown is the central piece to actually helping you win the game.
Was that the lemon wedge or was that the gravy?
It's both because it's because it's
don't,
a throne room.
Don't put lemon in. Don't.
It's a lemon gravy.
No.
A Bernays.
No.
So if you
Bernays is not gravy. First of all,
I don't know what gravy technically is. If not, isn't gravy just like sauce?
Gravy. I thought gravy was something made from pan drippings. A
You might
sauce
be
made
right.
from pan drippings. It's usually thick. And,
Well, anyway.
and a lot of times, if you put acid in that, it's going to break the sauce. Especially if it's, like, cream-based.
Man, you know a lot about this stuff.
I
But,
like food, okay?
So, yeah, I will say, I think that Crown is going to be the central piece that actually helps you win the game with your deck outside of the attacks. It could even be the piece that helps you recover from the attacks. So, I don't know. The right time to add crowns to the deck is going to be interesting, I think.
Sure.
Crowning Catapult is going to be a lot better for, thinning out curses and coppers than not crowning it. But I'd be interested to see if that actually comes out.
If you started with 3 cards in hand, that's going to be difficult.
It is, and the City Quarter being the main source of draw, other than the encampments, yeah.
That sucks.
Man, the encampments are probably going to be interesting and important, and I'd wager they're going to get passed around a lot. Because you don't really...
You have to play him to have a good turn.
You don't want golds in the deck, and I don't think you're going to get a Plunder.
You could gain a gold with Tragic Hero just to keep your encampments in the deck.
Okay.
Tragic Hero. Flexible.
There we go, yeah.
Yep.
No, my real question was, do you ever not gain Platinum to gain Crown? And I'm going to say probably not, but maybe.
I feel like if you have that choice, you've already won the game.
I don't know. We'll have to see, man.
We'll have to see. We will have to see.
You might
Let
be
us know
right.
in the comments section. Or wherever else. You could go to adamhorton.com.
Yeah.
You can go to the forums there. Let us know there. Or, we have other contact information on that page.
Yeah.
Link to the Discord channel. You can talk
when
to us
Adam
there.
has his kid, you can find out where the kid goes to school and approach the kid and say, I have a message for your dad, and get in touch with Adam that way.
Do you want a restraining order? That's really creepy, dude. Don't
I'm just saying it's an
do
option.
that. Okay, if my kid is born this week, it's going to be a long time before that kid goes to school.
You don't know when people are listening to this.
Okay, that's a fair point. Okay.
A time capsule podcast.
Don't stalk me or my family. If you want to stalk someone, stalk Jake.
Yeah, I could use the company.
And anyway, assuming that this is it, it's been real. That doesn't mean there won't be any content. We're gonna have some mini-sodes. Wandering Winder has recorded a lot of them,
Yeah.
and we've recorded a few of them.
Yep.
I don't know how many there are gonna be. I don't know exactly when they're gonna start. I'm gonna go check on my wife now. Once we're done recording the podcast,
Maybe she'll have the baby when you get up there.
you know what? I'd actually be a little upset if that was the case. I specifically told her that if she thought she was in labor, that she should come down and interrupt us recording the podcast.
Yeah.
She hasn't done that. I feel
Or
like
send the baby down.
or send the baby down.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Yep.
And we'll see you on the other side. We may have many weeks to think over this kingdom. Play it a lot of times.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap.
That's the podcast.
Yeah, a battle card game.
Not a card game.
Yeah. I feel like there was a Coke commercial at one. Yeah, no, there was a radio commercial for Coca-Cola that had somebody like opening up the can really loudly into the microphone and then slurping it and then going and it like it had the narrator talking in between all this stuff and it was like it's the sensory experience. It's the Coke and food. It's warm. Yeah, it's really
Pepsi, the choice of a new generation.
Oh wow, is that a Pepsi slogan? That sounds like it.
Oh, that's quality.